With plenty of new and updated touring motorcycles hitting the market for 2025, here we go with our pick of the bunch, listed in ascending order of price, starting with the more affordable options. We've got Triumph's brilliant Tiger Sport 660, which might not look vastly different year over year, but under the covers, it gets quite a few nice little upgrades. The sweet 660 inline triple remains the same at 80 horsepower peak, as does the chassis, which was already very good in terms of handling. But it's the package that gets some attention, with plenty of new features now fitted as standard. For starters, there's cruise control, which is an absolute must for me on a bike like this. They've also added an inertial measurement unit, which now gives you cornering ABS on top of the existing switchable traction control. You also get a new sport riding mode, a very welcome addition, with the existing two modes of road and rain being very approachable, but maybe lacking a little snap if you wanted to get a move on. And as if that weren't already enough, for 2025, the quick shifter accessory and the Bluetooth connectivity module both now come fitted as standard, which has to be worth more than 500 quid saved if you were thinking about specing them up. So, at £8,995, it's about 500 quid more than when it launched a couple of years back. But given what you're now getting in terms of features and all the little things they've added, well, I don't think it looks too bad at all. Although you might want to reserve another 100 quid for the Ruler green paint job, which I think looks absolutely awesome, and that's also new for 2025. The thing is though, if you're eyeing up a Tiger Sport 660, this next bike is going to be very tempting with its new 800cc version for 2025. Now, admittedly, it's a couple of grams heavier than the 660 version, but with an additional 30 horsepower, it's going to be quite appealing for a couple of reasons. One is pretty obvious, it's going to be a much quicker bike. But the second reason is that if you're thinking of long-distance touring and like to ride two up with luggage, then 113 horsepower sounds much more appropriate for that kind of work. In fact, there are plenty of reasons why I think this bike will be better suited for touring. For starters, you get more adjustability in the suspension, including compression and rebound on the fork, and preload and rebound on the shock, compared to just preload on the shock of the 660. Additionally, with more mass on the bike, a bit more stopping power is always welcome, especially if it's a faster bike. So, the upgraded Triumph-branded radial calipers are definitely a good addition. Another improvement is the slightly bigger fairing, which provides better wind protection. Clearly, I'd expect this to be a much more accomplished touring bike, especially if you load it up. It's one of the bikes I'm most looking forward to reviewing this year. Keep your eyes peeled if you want to see that video as soon as it goes live. That said, there are some great alternatives in this part of the market at a similar price. The bracket is similar to the F900XR from BMW, another model that hasn't changed much visually, but has received a few spec tweaks to keep it fresh for the new model year. These updates should hopefully give it a bit more liveliness. For example, the wheels have shed 1.8 kilograms, which should result in quicker direction changes. The fork has also been upgraded to full adjustability, whereas the previous generation was completely non-adjustable. In terms of tech, there's now lean-sensitive ABS and traction control, an adaptive headlight, a USB-C socket, and heated grips, all fitted as standard. The aerodynamics have been revised for better comfort on the motorway. They say the new windscreen shape reduces wind pressure and buffeting on the rider. Plus, the standard fit handguards help reduce chill on your fingers. On top of all that, they've added an Akrapovic exhaust accessory, which wasn't available for the previous generation, along with a couple of new fancy paint jobs. However, the main consideration when choosing between a bike like this and the Tiger, for example, is the vastly different engine characteristics. This one features a parallel twin with a 270-degree crank, which some people may prefer over the inline triple. Personally, I love the flexibility of an inline triple, with all its mid-range torque and a bit of revvy top-end fun. It makes for a super versatile ride, perfectly suited for a sports tourer like this. That's why I think it's going to be a really tough call between the new Tiger Sport 800 and the proven performer in this market, the Tracer 9. The bike has been a solid performer for many years, but 2025 brings a refresh with more capacity and a new name. The big inline-4 engine goes from 1,043 cubic centimeters to 199 cubic centimeters, and with that, this particular bike sees a substantial increase in peak power. It jumps from 118 horsepower in the previous generation to a rather impressive 133 horsepower. Additionally, there's more torque in the mid-range, and the gearing has been revised. The quick shifter, which comes as standard on the premium S and SE versions, has been refined to operate more smoothly at lower revs. Elsewhere, the bike is largely the same as the previous generation. The looks, chassis, and ergonomics are all pretty much unchanged. However, considering it was already a popular bike, Kawasaki seems to be betting that the headline horsepower increase will be enough to keep it as a strong seller. Alternatively, another option from the Kawasaki lineup is a much more sport touring-focused bike. The new 2025 Ninja 1100SX costs just £350 more than the Versys, but for that extra price, you get a lighter, lower-slung bike with a more aggressive riding position. This makes it the better choice if you're looking to go fast, while still maintaining enough comfort for long-distance rides. For 2025, both bikes share the same 1100 inline-4 engine with the exact same state of tune. While the Versys got a nice boost in peak power, the Ninja 1010SX is slightly down on horsepower, though that drop may have been softened a bit for a more refined ride. For the first time, the Ninja 1100SX will also be available in a more premium S spec, which includes stylish Brembo brakes up front and an upgraded Ulan shock at the rear. At Honda, though, for a similar price, we've got the NT100, which is a super solid, comfortable touring bike built upon the Africa Twin platform. It was launched a couple of years back, and I have to say, I was generally impressed, although it did have a couple of little quirks and niggles that needed ironing out. Thankfully, for 2025, they seem to have sorted all of them, with bigger side cases, for example, that can now fit a helmet. The windscreen is now easier to adjust too, with the previous generation being a bit awkward. It was so stiff that you had to pretty much get off the bike and adjust it with both hands. On the new 2025 bike, I believe it can now be adjusted with just one hand, so you can make quick changes on the fly. In addition to that, as well as being available with their DCT automatic gearbox, it now comes with the ES version, or electronic suspension, which I assume carries over a similar Showa semi-active system to the one found on the Africa Twin. For me, this is absolutely perfect for this style of bike, where you want the versatility of suspension that's constantly adjusting to give you the best possible ride. Of course, like the Africa Twin, you've got to be prepared to pay a bit more for it. I believe this one comes in with the DCT and electronic suspension at just over $14,000. Still, for the base model, I should add, they've managed to keep the price the same year over year, which I think is impressive, especially considering they've addressed some issues and made enhancements. Unfortunately though, this bike is still not available in the US. This next bike came up in our adventure list, but I think it's worth including here too. And it's the Multistrada V2 from KTI. I guess you've seen it. The slightly oversized 19-inch front wheel does give it a subtle off-road capability and a bit of adventure bike handling. But apart from that, it's essentially a direct competitor to bikes like the Tracer 9 and the Tiger Sport 800. It is, however, a much more expensive option, as you'd expect from Ducati, priced just shy of £14,000. That said, it does have a level of desirability in its looks that you might not necessarily find in the other two. New for 2025, it features a completely redesigned V2 engine, replacing the Testa Stretta from the previous generation. While the performance isn't drastically different, the engine is significantly lighter, which has helped reduce the weight of the entire package. It also comes with a new aluminum frame. Still, I have to say that price tag seems pretty steep compared to the competition, and it looks even more so if you opt for the UP Spec S version with the semi-active suspension, which pushes the price to over £16,000. In the thick of trying to secure enough money to keep their business alive, it's a shame because they had some really exciting new bikes announced for 2025, including this one. It's the new 1390 version of the Super Duke GT Sports Tourer, which should be an absolute rocket ship, with that big V-twin now, producing an impressive peak figure of 188 horsepower. This easily makes it the most powerful bike on this list. The rest of the chassis also looks up to spec, with top-notch brakes and semi-active suspension from Brembo and WP, respectively. On top of that, there's the new, more aggressive styling, which I think is a solid improvement, as well as some revisions to the tech, including their new 8.88-inch TFT display, which is absolutely massive and features some sleek new graphics. Hopefully, the future of KTM will become clearer and more certain soon, but in the meantime, this is certainly one for the maybe list if you want a really fast sports tourer in 2025. That is, of course, assuming you can afford it. Still, it doesn't even come close to topping this list, as big American-style tourers are generally always the most expensive of the bunch. Though BMW's interpretations aren't too bad, especially with the R18 platform, which comes in 5 different variants, here I'm focusing on the R18B Bagger and the R18 Transcontinental Full Tour. Both receive updates for the new model year, including tweaks to the large 1.8-litre Boxer twin engine to make it Euro 5 Plus emissions compliant. And while they're at it, BMW decided to add quite a bit more torque, with the engine now producing 163 Nm peak torque, which is about 5 Nm more than the previous generation. They've also kept the bikes looking fresh, with new finishes available. But what I find most impressive, especially given the substantial nature of these bikes, is the US pricing, which is significantly lower than the competition. Presumably, this is part of an effort to drive sales. Take the R18 Billion, for example. It costs £22,450 in the UK, but in the US, the starting price is just $21,070. Of course, there are some nuances when it comes to the financing of importing motorcycles to different countries, but if you do a simplistic currency conversion, the US price in pounds would be the equivalent of $16.99, which seems like an absolute steal, is certainly cheap. Cheaper than India's most similar bikes in the Chief and the Roadmaster. In previous years, these models used their air-cooled Thunderstroke engine to deliver maximum character, soul, and torque. However, stricter emissions regulations and possibly changing customer expectations for performance may have forced their hand. For 2025, both bikes now transition to their liquid-cooled Power Plus engine, previously used in the Challenger and Pursuit models. This means more performance, certainly in terms of peak power, now reaching 126 horsepower. It also retains plenty of torque, with 181 Nm available right in the mid-range at 3,800 RPM. Additionally, both bikes now feature a sportier chassis with a new frame, upside-down fork, and Brembo brakes. Tech has also received a massive boost, including a rear-facing radar for blind spot detection, tailgate warnings, and rear collision alerts. So it's a serious update, built from the ground up. While they do look impressive, I will say they're so similar now to the Challenger and Pursuit, both built on the Power Plus platform, that it's a little hard to see why they all still exist.